Yes, my friends. Hopefully this is working. I see it is. Welcome, everybody. Good morning. Welcome to C3. Welcome to C3's live at home edition. Let me do a quick reposting of things. All right, that's finished. And let me open up my Instagram. Okay. Oh, yes. Hey, everybody. Good morning. Hi, Beth. Hi, Wayne. Hi, Joan. It's good to be back. This is starting to feel like strangely normal. As if any of us know what normal is anymore. But here I am again, coming to you live on Instagram and Facebook. Another C3 teaching. C3 West Michigan's inclusive spiritual community. If you don't know, it's where I work. It's where I teach. It's an amazing, interesting, lively, and diverse community in Grand Haven, Michigan. And people travel in on Sunday mornings, but we meet in Grand Haven at the community center normally, under normal circumstances. Now we're meeting online, meeting in this strange and kind of life-giving format in an odd sort of way. I mean, thank God for this way of sort of engaging and interacting. It makes us feel a little less alone and a little more connected. So maybe just a couple C3 oriented announcements. If you were paying attention to the last couple of live posts, I mentioned something, a program that we started called Plant Up and Fly Right, where we've been planting trees. We did it last year and we're doing it again for Earth Day, which just passed this week. And we started in Spring Lake. Now we're planting in Grand Haven in cooperation with the city and with private donors. So it's still going on and will close May 1st. We have something like, last time I checked, 37 trees committed. All that information you can find on our Facebook page on c3westmichigan.org. Click on the newsletter and you can find out the details. $85 buys you a tree, a full-grown tree. Well, full-grown, they keep growing. Adolescent tree. But I think it's an amazing opportunity to do something now that pushes us out toward the collective, toward the larger field, toward the bigger questions. How are we living? And what will outlive us? And what's good for us and the earth and our community and so forth. So anyway, check out that program. Today's musical guest, sometimes I forget to announce the musical guest, so I'm sorry, it's Jen Siggett today, another local amazing musician. So as soon as I'm done with this broadcast, I will repost her live Facebook music session. And I don't know if you're like me, but like now more than ever, I'm craving, meaning art, beauty, and particularly music. There's something, I don't know, it's something that the soul craves in terms of meaning and beauty right now in a time of crisis. So you can help support our local musicians who are mostly out of work by supporting C3. And that link is probably somewhere in the comments shortly if you want to help support our ongoing work, which we really appreciate. Okay. So today's talk, my series I titled What Really Matters, but with a question mark, because that's the question that's working on me. What matters right now? It's a kind of searching spiritual inventory question. How have I been living? What really matters to me? Who are my friends? What does it mean to be an American? What's it mean to be a global citizen? In what ways have we been living that has been shown to be paper thin and um, and elusive and illusory. That's the word I'm looking for. Like an illusion. These are the questions of the searching spiritual inventory, and is sort of behind what really matters. And again, this is C3, where we value diversity of opinions. We'll be having guest teachers in the future on this broadcast, so check them out. But we're not here just doling out answers. I'm not here doling out. I'm going to now tell you what really matters. I want to raise the question because I think it's challenging. And so today I want to talk about the collective, what really matters, the collective. And I put in parentheses the shadow, like the collective shadow, because this is an opportunity to talk about the shadow because it's ever present. And I don't just mean the personal shadow, but I also mean the collective shadow. And before all this started, I was going to do a whole series just on the shadow itself. That's a term from Jung. What we don't know about ourselves. That is the direct, most simple definition of the shadow, what we don't know about ourselves. And sometimes I like to say, which I got from Bill Plotkin, what we don't know about ourselves, and if accused, would flatly deny. So the hidden stuff. And so that's important to talk about personally, but I would like to suggest a conversation about the collective. What we don't want to know about ourselves is one of the opportunities now in the liminal space that we're in. Liminal, of course, comes from the Latin word threshold. And here's the truth. We have left one room and we haven't entered another. That's what's happening collectively. We have left one room and we haven't entered the other. We are in between. And the in-between time is a time of on the one hand, stress and anxiety, fear and discouragement, disorientation, and on the other time, it feels potent. It feels ripe. It feels like a womb-like time, like something might be born, but we're just not quite sure yet. And the liminal time is the time that does the most work on us, and personally, and I think collectively, and I'm not the only one saying this, we know this is some kind of global opportunity, but we're just not sure what, for what, and to what end. With that said, let's roam around the idea of the collective shadow. Before I do that, I want to read to you something from a friend of mine. I'm involved in an organization called Animus Valley Institute in Colorado, started by the psychologist Bill Plotkin, and now there are lots of leaders and guides involved in Animus, and I'm in their guide training program where we take people outside and into wild places and do really psycho-spiritual work in an outdoor setting in small groups. To me, it's been transformative. But anyway, one of my friends in the program sent an email out a couple of weeks ago, and I want to read it to you because I'd like to begin with a sort of opening prayer here. Here's what she says. Her name is Christy. I offer gratitude to the ways in which our current circumstances may awaken a wide and deep appreciation for our interconnectedness, how we are each affected by one another and our habits and choices, a greater awareness of the sources to our nourishment and supplies, and the industries and systems we have not wholly considered. May there be a global invitation to return to a village consciousness. I offer prayers that our resilient bodies remain or become healthier, that we are kind and compassionate with one another, that we demonstrate our respect and understanding for our human circumstances in the context of our place on earth. May we listen each day for how we might be good partners for each other, human, wild, and otherwise, for how we might see what we may have been unable to see before, and to sing our songs and shed our tears and shout our exaltations, rejoice and fall to our knees for the heartbreak and beauty that is before us. So special thanks to Christy for that sort of poem prayer. I hope you hear a little hint or guess in there by way of encouragement this morning. And there was something about the phrase village consciousness that caught my attention. And I don't know what she means, but I find it kind of an alluring phrase because on the one hand, we're realizing just how global everything is. And we are deeply, deeply, deeply interconnected and interwoven. That's part of what COVID is exposing, which is beautiful. And at the same time, it brings us back to a sense of place, a particular place on earth. I'm in Ada, Michigan right now. I'm in my neighbor's shop. And I'm looking out at this particular hillside through the window. And a particular neighborhood and the particular way in which this neighborhood is connected to the neighborhoods and to the city of Grand Rapids and to the place of West Michigan. And in some ways, sort of village consciousness, I think, is a greater turning toward our neighbors, our actual neighbors. And of course, that's like the rings in a pond, they extend out from there. But a village consciousness is not a narcissistic consciousness. And maybe that's all I want to muse on that for a moment, but maybe I don't even want to explain it. I just want to say that's kind of an alluring phrase, and I wonder what she means by that. And I wonder what the invitation is. And along those same lines, let's talk about the opportunity to for our own consciousness to expand in terms of its. I keep holding this. People are like, what the heck is he holding? Yes, I'm holding an Allen wrench. I'm going to put this down. This is an amazing opportunity for our consciousness to expand in terms of its inclusion of the other and of the collective. And we might even say of the larger Earth community. That's the kind of invitation a major crisis, I think, opens up. There are, of course, no guarantees. In the image of the threshold space, we've left one room and we haven't arrived. We've left one room and we haven't arrived. We don't really know. And I think that not knowing has work to do on its own here. So first of all, here's some observations. I want to work my way toward what is meant by the collective shadow. And I'm not going to a huge lecture on this or something. And I see suddenly Facebook is giving me problems. I'm going to take a quick pause here, and I'm going to end this video and come right back. Let me know if you can see me, by the way. On Facebook, that is. Okay, Beth says it seems to be okay on this end, so whatever. I have disappeared, so keep sending me little notes that says seems fine to me. Okay, so first of all, let's talk about stress. So in stressful times, this is point number one. In stressful times, no matter what, we are pushed toward the extremes of good and bad, always. It's like the pressure and the stress or even the anxiety forces us to divide the world up between good and bad. Another way of saying that is safe and unsafe. Who doesn't feel that? I don't like going to the grocery store because it enhances that feeling of stress. Is this safe? Is this person safe? This person's wearing a mask. This person isn't wearing a mask. this person is good, this person is bad. And beneath that is actually something a little bit darker. Even in terms of good and evil, this person is good or I'm good, this person over here is evil, they're evil, that kind of thing. And I'm not exaggerating at all. I'm describing something that's happening consciously and mostly unconsciously, this division of the world between good and bad. That's what stress will do. Here's another way of putting it. I will know who I am by what I am not. I will know who I am by what I am not. That's the against energy. I'm not like that person who's unsafe. I'm not living over there, which is a more unsafe place. Whatever the case may be. I'm not criticizing any of this. None of us could have imagined the world that we're currently living in terms of stress. And stress pushes the poles. And if we put it in political terms, red and blue, conservative, liberal, whatever, let's just say Republican and Democrat, because I don't think anybody knows what even some of these words mean anymore, like conservative and liberal. Let's just say Republican and Democrat. People tend to pull back and find others who are safe like them, meaning they have the correct worldview, a better worldview, and they push away people that have a disturbing worldview, a wrong worldview, and let's push it all the way and say an evil worldview. And if here's the conclusion that the dark side of our psyche makes, if I could eliminate them from the equation, I would be safe, protected, and whole. That's partly what I mean by the shadowy elements that take over. We'll get to that in a few moments. But I'm saying stress just causes it. In fact, if you can catch yourself, even in the act of dividing the world up between safe and unsafe and good and bad and evil and good and so forth, if you could just be aware of that and not shame yourself, just say, okay, this is happening. This is happening right now. This is what human beings do in stressful times. It's just not the only thing that human beings do in stressful times. So that's enough on stress. Here's point number 2 when it comes to the shadow. And it has to do with a technical term called the persona. You've heard me say a few times the word persona if you've been around C3 for a while, but I want to give you the technical, of course you've heard the word too, but the technical definition of persona comes from the Latin, and it simply means mask. The mask that we wear. And everybody has a persona or several of them. Nothing wrong with this. In fact, you can check in with your own persona by imagining, not right now, but maybe after this broadcast, imagine you're at a party. How do you interact with people? What's that like? That's the mask. You definitely know. I don't care if you're an extrovert or an introvert, when you're at a party, when you're at a work party, you behave in a certain way. That's the mask. That's the persona. And you're aware of it. But you also have a persona that you're not that aware of. That's on the one hand. Now let me say something else on the collective field, because that's where this is going. There's also a collective persona. The face we put out there to the world can happen collectively, like a religious group, like a denomination, like a political party has a mask. It's not really true what's behind the mask. Or the mask reveals only part of the truth. The deeper truth is what's behind the mask, but it's very hard to see. And we can extend that all the way out to nations, like the persona of America, the mask that America wears. And if we were to do a poll here, a survey, and ask something like, what is the mask America wears? What would people say? And I bet there'd be some commonalities. It might depend a little bit on your political persuasion, how you might describe the collective mask of America, but there's certainly a mask. Now, here's how things are related. This is from depth psychology. Mostly, I'm using some terms that Carl Jung popularized and used, and I'm more or less using his definitions. If the mask is the face we put in front of the world, what's all the way behind it is the shadow. Okay, think about it this way in terms of, let's say we're facing the light. What is behind us, directly behind us, we cannot see. That's what Carl Jung calls the shadow. It's what we cannot see about ourselves. And this is true of the whole collective. So if we put a certain, let's say America or the West, or narrow it down more to political party or region of bioregion inside the United States, or West Michigan, or your religious community, or whatever, okay? You have the persona. What is directly behind you, you can't see, and that's the shadow. And in times of stress, the shadow starts to leak out because the mask we're wearing develops cracks, or suddenly it seems inconsistent, or suddenly our worldview doesn't align with the face that we're putting out there to the world. By the way, let me ask you a question. I was just going to ask, like, raise your hand. That's what came into my head. I taught high school for too long, and I guess I'm still in the raise your hand. So I was about to say, raise your hand if you've ever traveled outside the United States. I don't know how you would do that online. I guess you could wave at me on Instagram or whatever, put a comment. But let's just take this for a moment, and please please continue to say good to go, can still hear you because I can see nothing on my screen when it comes to the video. Okay, have you ever traveled outside the United States and actually asked someone what they think of Americans? What kind of answers have you received? I remember when in Israel, a friend of mine had a poster on his shop wall that had a picture of Ariel Sharon breastfeeding George W. Bush. See, that's a different view of America. And it's kind of shocking when you first see it. You're like, I guess people don't think about America the way I think about America. This is what I mean by the shadow side. This is in part what I mean by we face one way and we cast a shadow behind us. I've been listening to a lot of Rufus Wainwright. He's been doing all these, you should check him out online. He's been doing all these quarantunes, live songs each day. And one of my favorite songs of his is called Going to a Town. He has this line that says, go into a town that has already been burned down. And my wife looked it up to see what the song was about, what town he was talking about. He was talking about Berlin. And it's such an interesting expression. I'm going to a town that has already been disgraced. I'm going to a town that has already been burned down, where people have already been let down. Those are lines in the song. This is what Europe is like, where they've lived through a few more wars and their history is a little bit longer, and there's been a series of humiliations. America is still like Icarus in many respects, still flying up to the sun with its paper wings. And I'm not even saying that negatively, it's just the way it is. They haven't yet crashed and burned. But we often can't see that because we say things like we're the smartest, we're the wealthiest, we have the most innovation, we have the best technology, we have the best healthcare systems, we have the smartest doctors, we have the best scientists, we have the smartest individuals in the government. All of that is part of, I don't care if you're right and left, that's part of the illusion that we hold. It's part of the mask that we put to the world, and behind it is the shadow. And what's in the shadow? Well, a lot of dark things. A lot of dark things. And we're becoming more conscious of the dark side of our own past. So let me say a couple things about this week. So this week, if you were paying attention and not living under a rock, which might actually be better for you, at this point. You saw Donald Trump come on national television, which he's been doing every single night, and he was sort of riffing, as he's prone to do, and kind of a stream of consciousness sort of riff. And in this riff, he said something about blasting people with light or injecting people with disinfectant. He's like, oh, I don't know. I mean, could be a good idea. Maybe he'd read something. Who knows? And of course, the whole world blew up. Like the outrage. How can a leader do this? And probably those are most of the voices I was hearing. I'm sure people were defending him too, saying, hey, he does this. He riffs on things. Don't take it so seriously. Who knows? But it struck me because it hooked me in a certain way. And part of me was thinking something like, how dare he speculate like this? How irresponsible, how dark, how, and if you go all the way in terms of shadow material, how evil. And here I am preparing for a talk about the shadow. And I'm gripped by this idea that human being, if we could just get rid of him, expel, eliminate, scapegoat, blame, these are all clues. If I could just get rid of him, then I would be safe, I would be right, I would be righteous. I would never talk like that. And now we're getting close to the shadow. There's no way I would speculate on scientific claims on national television. And at this point, we've reached the bullshit realm. Actually, I'm full of speculation. When I think about this, how dare he speculate? And I understand he's the president. Maybe he shouldn't be doing those sorts of things. But I'm not talking about a rational conversation here. I'm talking about being hooked by something. And do I speculate? Not only do I speculate, I've been doing a lot of speculating this week based on articles I might read. Or one study comes out and suddenly I, Kent Dobson, have a theory about COVID. Or I think maybe I already had it. I was kind of sick in January. Maybe this whole thing is overblown, and stuff that's turning over in my head, my own speculations based on nothing, I might add, based on random crap I read on the internet, mostly. What about my speculations? What do they amount to? They're just speculations. I'm doing the very thing he is doing. That's what I'm saying. That's the shadow, and that's the opportunity. Instead of scapegoating and pointing the finger always at him right now, Donald Trump, or whoever, fill in the blank. What if we stood back and said, what is this teaching about my own personal shadow, stuff I don't like to admit, and the collective, the larger whole? Actually, we live in a society right now that is full of speculation. If you talk about, I know that the other side says we believe in science, but science is complicated. And to come up with a scientific theory that's valid requires multiple sources and lots of time. And we read one thing, one study, and suddenly we're launching into our own extreme theories, so to speak. Suddenly we're experts. Suddenly we're scientists. So my main point is, in the collective sphere right now, there's a lot of speculation. And we hate it when we see it in Donald Trump, but we don't like to admit that we're doing it as well. That's what I'm saying about shadow opportunities. Let me just say something about race at this point, because Trump has said several times now, he's talked about the Chinese virus, and the internet has exploded and said he's being racist. I don't know if he's being racist. I don't know. It's hard to look into someone's heart or soul when they're saying words. However, it strikes me as the kind of thing that's like dividing the world up again. And just a real quick comment before I continue here. Please keep sending me little Facebook messages, because I want to make sure you can still see me, because it keeps giving me the message, we're having trouble with the video. Instagram seems to be fine, owned by the same company. And let me just get to my point about Trump and these comments about a Chinese virus and so forth that sound a bit racist, we could say. Well, what can we say? Let me say it directly so we can. If we can say loudly and clearly and with certainty that the problem is that Donald Trump is racist, we don't have to deal with our own. That's the bottom line when it comes to shadow. And race in particular opens up the trap door of the collective shadow that is America, which has racism, homophobia, ethnic cleansing, genocide. This is all in our history. And we know that, but we can barely admit it. Resource extraction and a kind of superiority, a kind of white superiority, white Western intellectual superiority versus other people groups. That is part of our shadow. It's not the persona we put out there to the world. It's what's cast behind us. And all of us, Americans, are implicated in this. It's in the collective field. You don't get to get out of it because it's rooted to your own dark side. All of us are prone to anger, jealousy, rage, racism, homophobia, sexism. We're all prone to that. It lives in the human heart, like it or not. I don't think it's just a matter of having a nice quality education and therefore you have no dark side. That's an illusion. So the kinds of things that I'm sort of musing on this morning is an invitation not only for us to do some work, but to take a look at the collective shadow side, invitation to take a look at the collective shadow side. So if we go back to stories we like to tell ourselves that we're the smartest, most educated, most tremendous, we have the best businesses in the world, we're always winning, we're always beating people. That's what makes this virus such an opportunity because you can't win. What are we winning, really? We can survive, we can decrease suffering, but you can't win like you win a contract or you win the Olympics. It doesn't seem to work like that, so it plays with our persona. We say, wait a minute, maybe we're not always winning at everything. Maybe winning isn't even the point. And suddenly I just thought of Jesus's really challenging teaching. The first shall be last and the last shall be first. The first shall be last and the last shall be first. This is taking the mask off. No. And turning around, turning toward some of the darkness. Because we win because we like to dominate and be in charge and be in control. And Jesus is saying something like, if that's your way of being, you've already lost. And I think COVID is inviting us maybe into a greater, at least turning towards some of these things. So, what else can I say? Maybe just look at my notes real quick. Speaking of winning, I saw something that Hillary Clinton said that also struck me as quite shadow material. She said, well, Donald Trump has always wanted to be number one. I'm paraphrasing. Now we're number one in COVID. Now, that's dark. That is some dark stuff right there. Because that's, in my estimation, that's a little of the shadow creeping in. I mean, what is she really saying? That is she delighting in the fact that I told you so? You reap what you sow? That's that kind of revenge posture that can grip us from time to time. See, you wanted to be number one, Donald Trump. Look at what you've done. That's dark. That's some dark stuff. And that's an opportunity. Nobody's above that. I've thought something similar. I'm not above this, believe me. And then the other part of me says, do I want to live like this? Do I want to live with this kind of I told you so revenge mentality, dividing the world up into deeper and deeper sort of resentments and blaming and scapegoating. Okay. So what can we do? I've been talking for 30 minutes now. It's time to land the plane and turn it over to Jen and her beautiful voice and songs. So here's some possible suggestions, and then I'm going to end with a Merton quotation here. List some things you hate. That's my invitation this week. List things you hate right now. And I mean really hate, despise, that really get your blood boiling. List them, make a list of them, on the right or the left. And be clear, be specific. Be as specific as you possibly can in this list of things you hate. And then ask yourself a question once you're done with this little list. Do I ever act like this? Do I ever act like this? Like my example was, I hated Donald Trump for speculating about what might work. And then I had to ask myself, do I ever act like this? And the answer is, yeah, I do. And I did it this week, in fact. Kent Dobson speculating on what's really going on scientifically. I mean, come on. So make a list of things that really, really hook you and say, do I ever act like this? Step 2 is to say something like, do we, the collective, do we ever act like this and refuse to admit it? And maybe you want to keep it within your group, like your political party or your political persuasion or people that are like you. Do we ever blame and point the finger but act like this? That requires, in fact, just the light of consciousness, breathing the light of consciousness into these dark places. Maybe that's as far as I want to go in terms of a possible suggestion. And here's one more thing. Here's a challenge that I am giving to myself. During this space between, this searching spiritual inventory, liminality place where we ask what really matters, is the thing that I'm posting or emailing or talking to people about or promoting, does it increase blame and scapegoating? Or another simpler way of saying it is, what I'm about to say or post, does it increase suffering or decrease suffering? To me, that's a huge challenge right now in the collective sphere. And what I'm saying, is it increasing suffering or decreasing suffering? Is it increasing scapegoating and blaming, or is it decreasing scapegoating and blaming? Because I don't think we can get anywhere near what I called at the beginning village consciousness if everything is scapegoat blame. If it's that tribal, I like the lions and not the bears kind of collective fervor, I don't think we can get anywhere near the invitation to remove at least a few of our masks and to turn around and face a bit of what we don't want to see. Okay. Here's a very famous passage from Merton, and I'm going to end with this. This is from one of his books called Conjectures of a Guilty Bystander. Thomas Merton was a monk who lived in Louisville. He was born in France and eventually made his way to the United States. And right at the time, especially in the 1940s, 50s, and 60s, when the whole world was being turned upside down in many respects, he went in the opposite direction, went into the Cistercian monastery with the white robes, and into a silent order. And from his place of solitude, he found his voice in this kind of paradoxical irony. Here's what he says. He one day left the monastery and went to Louisville. He said, in Louisville, at the corner of 4th and Walnut, in the center of the shopping district, I was suddenly overwhelmed with the realization that I loved all these people, that they were mine and I theirs, that we could not be alien to one another, even though we were total strangers. I'm thinking about encountering people with masks. There's kind of hiddenness there, which increases the fear alienation and isolation we have from one another, he says, I suddenly realized I am not alien. It was like waking from a dream of separateness, of spurious self-isolation in a special world. The illusion of separateness. He says this sense of liberation from an illusory difference was such a relief and such a joy to me that I almost laughed out loud. I have the immense joy of being human, a member of the human race in which God himself became incarnate. That's at the core of the Christian symbol. As if the sorrows and stupidities of the human condition could overwhelm me. Now I realize what we all are. And if only everybody could realize this. But it cannot be explained, he says. There's no way of telling people that they are walking around shining like the sun. That is a shift in consciousness. Then it was as if I suddenly saw the secret beauty of their hearts, behind the masks, behind the blaming, behind the scapegoating, behind the race, behind the part of the world. I suddenly saw the secret beauty of their hearts, the depths of their hearts, where neither sin nor desire nor self-knowledge can reach, the core of their reality, the person that each one is in God's eyes, Merton is saying. It's like seeing into the soul. If only they could all see themselves as they really are. If only we could see each other that way all the time. There would be no more war, no more hatred, no more cruelty, no more greed. But this cannot be seen, only believed and understood as a peculiar gift. I wish you well, my friends. I hope you can feel a bit of your own shining sun. And the next time you encounter a masked figure in the grocery store, you can imagine with your deep self that they too are like little gold diamonds walking around on this earth. Peace.